You'll remember the cremation of Sam McGee. This is the fellow who wrote it. This is his cabin where he did some of his work while in this area. He came up here for the seclusion.
He sort of managed to capture the world, well, Canada initially, but then the world's imagination writing about the Yukon. There was all this sort of hype about the Yukon and the Klondike and the gold rush coming out of that gold rush era, and then Robert Service comes up and starts writing about it. There wasn't really any material about it. They're just sort of newspaper clippings and these stories coming out of the Chilkoot and everything that was going on up here. But Jack London, Robert Service, they start writing these stories and publishing them, and they start selling really, really well because of everyone's interest in this area in that time period anyway. A bunch of the boys were whooping it up in the Malamute Saloon. The kid that handles the music box was hitting a jag-time tune. Back of the bar in a solo game sat Dangerous Dan McGrew, and watching his luck was his light-o' love, the lady that's known as Lou. When out of the night, which was 50 below, and into the din and the glare, there stumbled a miner fresh from the creeks, dog dirty and loaded for bear. He looked like a man with a foot in the grave and scarcely the strength of a louse, yet he tilted a poke of dust on the bar and he called for drinks for the house. There was none could place the stranger's face, so we searched ourselves for a clue, but we drank his health, and the last to drink was Dangerous Dan McGrew. There's men that somehow just grip your eyes and hold them hard like a spell, and such was he, and he looked to me like a man who had lived in hell. With a face most hair and the dreary stare of a dog whose day is done, as he watered the green stuff in his glass, and the drops fell one by one. Then I got to figuring who he was and wondering what he'd do, and I turned my head, and there watching him was the lady that's known as Lou. His eyes went rubbering round the room, and he seemed in a kind of daze, till at last that old piano fell in the way of his wandering gaze. The ragtime kid was having a drink, there was no one else on the stool, so the stranger stumbles across the room and flops down there like a fool. In a buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt he sat, and I saw him sway. Then he clutched the keys with his talon hands. My God, how that man could play. Were you ever out in the great alone when the moon was awful clear, and the icy mountains hemmed you in with a silence you could almost hear? With only the howl of a timber wolf, and you camped there in the cold, a half-dead thing in a stark dead world, clean mad for the muck called gold. While high overhead, green, yellow, and red, the northern lights swept in bars, then you've a hunch what the music meant, hunger and night and the stars. And hunger not of the belly kind that's banished with bacon and beans, but the gnawing hunger of lonely men for a home and all that that means. For a fireside far from the cares that are, four walls and a roof above, but oh so crammed full of cozy joy and crowned with a woman's love. A woman dearer than all the world and true as heaven is true. God, how ghastly she looks through her rouge, that lady that's known as Lou. Then on a sudden the music changed so soft you scarce could hear, but you felt that your life had been looted clean of all that it once held dear. That someone had stolen the woman you loved, that her love was a devil's lie, that your guts were gone and the best for you was to crawl away and die. 'Twas the crowning cry of a heart's despair, and it thrilled you through and through. I guess I'll make it a spread, miser, the Dangerous Dan McGrew. The music almost died away, then it burst like a pent-up flood, and it seemed to say, repay, repay, and my eyes were blind with blood. And the thought came of an ancient wrong, it stung like a frozen lash, and the lust awoke to kill, then the music it stopped with a crash. And the stranger turned, and his eyes they burned in a most peculiar way. In a buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt he sat, and I saw him sway. Then his lips went in a kind of grin, and he spoke, and his voice was calm, and boys, says he, you don't know me, and none of you care a damn. But I want to state, and my words are straight, and I'll bet my poke they're true, that one of you is a hound of hell, and that one is Dan McGrew. Then I ducked my head, and the lights went out, and two guns blazed in the dark, and a woman screamed, and the lights went up, and two men lay stiff and stark. Pitched on his head and pumped full of lead was Dangerous Dan McGrew, while the man from the creeks lay clutched to the breast of the lady that's known as Lou. These are the simple facts of the case, and I guess I ought to know. They say that the stranger was crazed with hooch, and I'm not denying it so. I'm not so wise as a lawyer, guys, but strictly between us two, the woman that kissed him and pinched his poke was the lady that's known as Lou.
Now, Jack London also came up here to Dawson City for the same reason, for solitude and quiet where he could do his work. That frost heave that we experienced on some of the highways There's also a problem with the buildings here. You put a heated building over frozen ground. As the ground melts, the buildings may collapse into it. These buildings are owned by the National Park Service of Canada, call it Park Canada, and they're being left in this state as a demonstration or a record of what can happen. This is an overhead picture of a dredge. The machine itself is right here, that 1,000,000-pound building. This is where it drops out the refuse. This is where it's digging up the gold-bearing dirt. It drops it out into these tailings, and these tailings exist for several miles between here and the city. It's just unbelievable. They've completely altered the landscape in this area forever. Take another look at all of these tailings, all of the white, and it's just a small part of it. A typical roadhouse stopover in the Yukon. Rent cabins, probably have a small store. It's a campground up the road. Typical rental unit with outdoor facilities. Interesting sign. I've often wondered about things like this. If I drink some water or Coca-Cola, am I in violation of this sort of law? It's the name of a roadhouse, a historical landmark. And this is what's left. They've stabilized it, but they haven't renewed it in any way. As you can see from the upstairs windows, it was a two-story affair with the living and dining area downstairs and the rooms upstairs. And it even had a little basement for storage. Kind of hard to see in the overgrowth. And next to it, a small cabin for which no explanation is given, perhaps as storage. Take a look at the inside of the Klondike. It was built in 1937 to replace one that sunk and operated up until 1955. Its last year was as a cruise ship. As you can see from the wave on that bridge support, the river moves along pretty good. I was told about 5 miles an hour, but it sure looks faster than that to me. The Klondike would go downriver in 40 hours. It would go upriver in 4 days. More than double the amount of time.
Example of 2 cords of wood. So this is a great industry for people.
Cruise quarters. Just like a cruise ship today. This is a first-class lounge. They had electricity on board. The generator down, steam operated, of course. Storage for the galley.
Garbage, so all the vegetable scraps.
Note the shrimp cocktail in the window. And the pilot house.
Yeah, it's a nice little place.
And this would be the master's cabin. The pilot's right next door. He's facing out, you can see out front. One bathroom for all of first class. Down the hallway, of course. You scheduled one bath while you were underway. One of the first class cabins designed to sleep 3. I am told the fireman would put in one log about every 30 seconds to keep the ship moving. These would be kegs for alcohol. They said beer. On the final run before the winter, the ship would carry basically nothing but alcohol.